Do you have a partner or a spouse that speaks another language and you want to learn from them in your relationship, but not harm your relationship because you've tried and it's frustrating and you get frustrated with their lack of patience with you, and maybe they don't really particularly show you very much patience? If that's so, in this video I got some tips for you. I have had 2 spouses that spoke different languages, and I have either learned those languages or am working towards learning them, and have been able to find out through hard-won experience how to do it without stress, without strain, without damaging the relationship. And so some tips around that are coming right up. Hey there, this is Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com. If you're not subscribed to this channel, get subscribed now so you don't miss anything about improving your memory, so you can learn a language, learn anything that you want to learn, and have the fullest possible advantage. That's what we do over at magneticmemorymethod.com. There are blog posts over there for you, free courses. There are all kinds of podcasts, all kinds of videos, and I really want to make sure that you have access to all that so that you don't have to struggle with your memory anymore. Now, when it comes to being a married person, my first wife, she spoke German and English. She was bilingual more or less from birth, and she not only spoke German, but she spoke like echt Deutsch and really cool Berliner slang, and she also knew Plattdeutsch and other things, like really great stuff. And she really very lovingly put together an actual sort of journal like this for me with just like the coolest German phrases you can imagine and all the great stuff. And sometimes those phrases were a little bit frustrating because you tell them to taxi drivers or to people that you meet and they'd be like, never heard of it, which is something that happens to you on your language journey a lot actually, but don't let that frustrate you. But in general, as cool as that was, we would get impatient with each other, and there's some reasons why. And the first thing, and here's a big tip for you, is that there was never any timing around it. We never preserved any particular time for working on things together, at least not in the beginning. And so because it was just so random, then that would lead to frustration. It wasn't given any priority, it wasn't given any space, it wasn't given any structure, it didn't have any goals, which is the second tip. Have actual goals for the time that you're spending. And because there was no timing and no goals, there wasn't any agreed upon material to work on. And so it's just random, which leads to frustration in life in general. So you may have heard of the concept of a family meeting, which I love to have now. There's a particular day for them, there's a particular time for them, and there's a particular structure where you're saying, okay, so we're going to meet at this time of day, we're going to spend 30 to 45 minutes on this, and we're going to have a notebook, and we're going to have an agenda, and we're going to go through each and every item, and we're going to start in a particular way, and we're going to end in a particular way. That just makes everything so smooth, and because it's regular and consistent, then that regularity and consistency makes it even smoother, and then you actually find that you're accomplishing things over and over and over again, and you just start to look forward to family meeting. Well, it's the same thing with language learning time with your spouse, and you set up actual distinct goals. So what's an example of that? Well, you might, for example, have a family party coming up. You know that you got some academics in the family, so what you do is you figure out what kind of vocabulary might be suitable there. And I remember doing this around Nietzsche. So what kind of, well, actually my former wife at the time was very, very kind. She bought me a Nietzsche lexicon, which was filled with all kinds of Nietzsche terminology, Nietzsche related terminology and so forth. And we just pulled words out of there and started to have discussions using that vocabulary. And it was great, it was great. We did it over a number of weeks, and we had a specific time for it, and it really, really helped. And come time for that party, yeah, well, away we go, right? And I had a much, much more grounded sense of discussion with people rather than just Nietzsche, I like him, Der Hammer, you know, like didn't get into that stuff. Got into like actual discussions about things that he'd said and why this or that term was important and so forth. It just enriches and enlivens everything, and it wouldn't have happened without that kind of structure there. So timing and having an actual goal for each session that you have is really, really important. The other thing too, this is a tip from my friend Ollie Richards that really helped me understand some frustrations that were coming up and came up a lot, particularly the first time around, is that your spouse is probably not a language teacher. And in both of my cases, that's exactly the case. Not language teacher. Not at all. Not even close. And so what that means is that they don't understand necessarily the pedagogical needs or concerns involved in the student experience of learning a language. Now, they may have themselves been students of learning a language. April, my present wife, and hopefully wife forever and ever, amen, she has the experience of having learned English and is a lifelong learner of English. When we learn another language, like fluency, whatever the heck that means, it doesn't really mean anything. We're not even fluent in our own mother tongues, right? So if we're learning another language, we're either learning it for a season or a reason or for life, to get a quote from my good friend Jonathan Levy. A season or a reason or a life, right? And so if you're all in, then you're learning that language for life. There's always going to be things to learn. There's always going to be vocabulary to add. And I would argue that's the same thing for your mother tongue as well. But your spouse doesn't necessarily have that responsibility, doesn't see it as their job necessarily, and they're not going to go and study pedagogical theory and understand the needs of second language learners, right? Or third language learners, or whatever the case may be. It's not their role necessarily, unless you come to some sort of agreement with your spouse or your partner in life and you say, hey, I'd like you to understand pedagogical theory a little bit better so you can understand my needs as a learner. I hope you're going to give back in kind somehow, like understand whatever it is they might need and brush up your skills. Maybe you learn to cook better because they like a certain cuisine or whatever, but it's a pretty heavy demand to put on people, your learning outcome, right? That they should take responsibility for that because they're a native speaker. But maybe you can work that out in your relationship. I don't know. In mine, that never made sense and wouldn't make sense, and I didn't even know until Ollie raised that point to even think that way. So this raises another issue, which is that you have to take it upon yourself to understand what the language learner needs. You have to take hold and grasp of what the pedagogical concerns of the language learner are, understand those needs, and make sure you're doing what it takes to fulfill them, and then explain to your partner what is actually helpful to you based on your pedagogical understanding. If you're not willing to do that, well, that's okay. Just acknowledge you're not willing to do that, move on. But wouldn't it be cool if you were willing to do that? And then you have much better discussions, like during family meeting, like during your language learning sessions. Everything's just gonna go so much smoother. You're gonna get so much more out of that time because your partner or your spouse will be enlightened to the needs of learners. And they'll be able to say, okay, great, I know that now, and we'll work on it, right? Simple, easy peasy lemon squeezy. But this is what actual knowledge about what learning requires and entails will bring to the game. So that's a major tip for you. And you know what? It always makes sense to learn more about learning how to learn. Learning what learning is, learning specifically what the demands are of language learning, really will help you learn the language better. Yes, it's like taking a step back from just learning the language, but the more you understand of the learning process, the more you can guide yourself better and guide the people who are helping you. It doesn't even have to be a partner or a spouse. If you're gonna hop on Skype with someone that you are trading time with or that you've hired to be a speaking partner or a language learning teacher, the more you yourself know about the pedagogical needs of a language learner and you know about yourself in the mix, the more you're gonna get out of those sessions. It's just impossible not to get more out of them because you're educated about what you need and what learners tend to need. The last tip that I got for you, I think it's the most important one of all, is to defang everything, take the stress out of everything, maybe make it a bit more of a game, but just say, look, I don't want to have any stress associated with this. Language learning is frustrating. It's frustrating for both teachers and students, no matter what, but it's also tremendously rewarding. When is it rewarding? Well, it's rewarding when it's fun. It's rewarding when it's not stressful. It's rewarding when we actually see results coming out of it, quick little victories, and then long-term gains, which you'll get out of having a structured plan and actual dedicated time that you spend to it. But it really helps to have some clarity around the major goal that you should have in a language learning setting with a partner or a spouse, to defang it of stress. And then when stressful things happen, just say, whoa. No, come on, we're taking this too seriously, or that's just adding a level of complexity that leads to stress. Let's break it down, let's simplify, let's not have this stress, and just avoid it altogether. Know when to quit, know when to come back to things. You'll get more out of a good solid 5 minutes than you will get out of 30 minutes of frustration, right? So focus on understanding what's working, when it's working, how it's working, and when it's framed and structured and has a foundation just totally free of frustration. How do you do it? Well, you do it with communication and knowing what triggers frustration, right? And then just avoiding those things, not having those things as part of it. And avoiding is not necessarily the word that I want, but it's having an understanding of them and just keeping them out of the game. And if you think of it as a game, right, and you have game theory in your mind, what is game theory? Well, part of game theory is structuring learning sessions like a game to have the outcome being that that game is a game that you will cheerfully be invited back to play again and again and again because it's so rewarding. And that brings in the idea of the challenge frustration curve. So in order to learn, you need to be sufficiently challenged. It can't be easy or else it gets boring, but you don't want to be frustrated, because when you get frustrated, then you're going to quit, you're going to stop, and that's no good. So you want to be challenged, but you don't want to be frustrated. So you just got to always kind of feel for that mix. And you know what? It's going to be different every single time. So be prepared for that and accept it, embrace it, make it part of the game. Oh, that's a little bit too frustrating. Let's go back to challenge, or let's come back to this later, spend some individual time memorizing, using memory techniques, and then come back to it later. You're going to have the most amazing time. You're going to get much more out of it. For me, one of the things that is the most frustrating in my present situation is Chinese tones and pronunciation. I'm a little bit sloppy around it, and that is not going to fly in Chinese, right? So when my wife is just like, huh, or, you know, what, or, you know, and then like, I know that she knows what I'm trying to say, but she just like will refuse to actually acknowledge that it is what I'm trying to say unless the tone is correct. Then I have to step up to my game, not get frustrated, go, okay, so it was 1 and 4, right? Or it was 2 and 1, right? And she's like, yeah, so you memorized what the tones were, but you're not using the tones. So I'm like, okay, I will make a dedicated effort to make those tones and then actually reach the tones. It's not my favorite part of language learning, but it is one of the frustration points. And so when it gets frustrating, just step back. Maybe if you're a meditator, you'll have a buffer zone already, not turn it into an issue, and say, okay, so did I get it right? Am I approximating it? And maybe even in my case, if you have tonal issues in the language you're learning, say what the tones are first. Just defang it of frustration. So often I'll say, okay, look, I remember that the tones were the first tone and the fourth tone in the key vocabulary term in this sentence. I'm gonna try and hit it. Let me know how I do, 1 to 10, okay? And that just strips it of frustration from the beginning, because it's setting her up to help me succeed, right? How am I going to succeed better? Because I'm gonna get an actual piece of meaningful feedback, substantial feedback, because I've given it a scale 1 to 10, right? And she'll say 80%, or she'll say 100%, right? And it's just beautiful. It's much, much more fun. And I'll come with 10 sentences and say, okay, let's give each of these a grade from 1 to 10 in terms of my tones. Pretty sure I memorized all the tones properly. I don't know if they're gonna come out in my mouth that way properly, but let's see how we do. She knows the rules of the game. I know the rules of the game. And away we go. We play. And we play in such a way that we are cheerfully going to play the game again. That is how you have fun with games, is always construct them so that you're as happy as peaches to come back and play them again. Because if you make them painful, you're not going to want to play them anymore, and you're going to miss out on so much of life's pleasures. So I hope these tips helped you in your relationship, because so many of us are married to people whose mother tongue is different than our own. So many of us feel shut out from our families because we can't communicate. Learning the language is nebulous, it's difficult, it's hard to fathom that we'll ever get there, because our spouse is either frustrating the heck out of us whenever we try to learn from them as if like, you know, just taking their energy, or we frustrate them and make it an unpleasant game. So you don't have to. I hope these tips help you, and I'm confident that they will, actually, if you give them a try. Watch this video again if you need to, and again, if you're not subscribed to this channel, you like information like this, hit me up with a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you think, what your experiences are with learning a language in a partnership or a marriage. And if you're not subscribed, get subscribed. And come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com. I got a free memory training for you. It's a kit, it's got PDFs, videos, all that you need to create memory palaces so that you can memorize 10 sentences and present them to your spouse from memory very, very quickly. That's at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. Thanks again for watching this video. Thanks for your thumbs up. Thanks for your engagement. Thanks for getting subscribed if you're not already. Until we have a chance to speak again, this is Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com. Until we speak again, keep yourself magnetic.